Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy. This is the CRKT Shizuka Noh. I'm very sorry I'm mispronouncing Japanese, that happens. But first off, I want to thank my buddy Chuck for sending this guy along. This is a knife I absolutely wouldn't have checked out otherwise, but it is interesting, so thank you for that, Chuck. Next thing, size comparison. Of course, here it is against the Spyderco Delica, as always. The steel wheel cut jack 3-inch model and the Ontario rat number 1 right here. And so you can see here, this is actually a surprisingly long blade. If I find my ruler, which I swear is around here someplace, here we go. If I find my ruler, what we can see here is that this guy comes in at approximately 3.75 inches, which is going to put it over a lot of legal lines. But yeah, there you go. So that's the size of it. Next thing, this was made by a guy named James Williams. And according to the website, he has classical samurai training and works with worldwide military special ops, performing at the highest level. And the name of this knife actually translates to hidden blade, which summarizes, and I quote, the intended role of providing the user with an even more compact tactical knife that can be carried inconspicuously in an everyday fashion as a complement to your personal defense tools. That's pretty serious. That's some high speed and some low drag right there. The thing is, though, I am not a tactical guy, and so I'm going to kind of miss the point entirely, and I'm going to review this from the perspective of an everyday carry knife. Check the self-defense side of this with somebody who knows what they're talking about in that domain, and of course, remember that having a knife doesn't make you safe. Having training makes you safe. But nonetheless, I'm going to focus on, does this make a good everyday carry knife in addition to being whatever tacticality it has, or is this just doing that and not worth your time if you're not going that route? So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this particular little tactical knife here. First off, on the good side, I do actually appreciate the boldness of going ahead and naming the knife in another language. It's not something that's very often done, and I don't know why. I think it's kind of cool, and I think it gives people, not only is it being used here for samurai authenticity, but, it opens up the namespace a little bit, and that's fun. So I got to give credit there. Next thing, the locks system. This is using the CRKT locks, LAWKS, which is able to basically lock the knife in an open position. When the knife is open, if you move this little lever forward here, it puts this little, basically, hopefully you can see it there. Yeah, it puts this little standoff here, that's not the proper term, but it is what it is, in a position so that it prevents the lock bar from opening again. So you cannot unlock this knife no matter what you would do with this little guy in position. You would have to deform this in addition to moving the lock bar over. That does give it a little bit more solidity. The thing is, honestly, I like this implementation of the locks system better than other ones I've had. Because, look, it's completely flush with the top of the knife here. There is nothing preventing me from using the knife normally, from using a regular ergonomic grip, etc., with this lock system here, but it is very easy to engage and disengage if I actually need it. And so if they're going to do the lock system, this is a nice way to do it. With that little recessed thing, makes it very, very easy to ignore if I want it and very easy to use if I do. So there you go. Next thing, the ergonomics on this guy are actually fine. It works okay in my hand in both a conventional saber grip, a hammer grip, and I imagine they're probably after the reverse grip, and this back space really does work pretty well there. So can't argue with that. It is also very secure in the hand. Having this finger groove here, makes this guy not want to go anywhere, along with the grippy G10 here. I mean, it is absolutely a fine knife, even in inclement conditions, that kind of thing. It has a very nice deep carry clip, which is completely reversible, meaning that although the knife itself is not ambidextrous, although it's got an ambidextrous disc, I suppose, you can flip the clip around, which means you can carry it on whatever side you'd like, which is good. And it is a very deep carry clip, and considering that it is black, although it is branded, you can probably get rid of that. Nonetheless, it is going to be very discreet. It is going to be hidden, indeed, as the name says. It has a nice tall and thin profile, which makes this actually pretty easy to carry. Keeping this guy in my pocket was not very hard. You've got, compared to the Delica here, this is thinner and actually reasonably small for the blade length here. So I got to give him credit for that 100%. And finally, I actually have to say, this is pretty well made. It's not perfection, absolutely, but it is one of the better constructed CRKTs I've handled. With everything actually being in rough off alignment. It could just be that I happen to get one on the long tail of goodness, or maybe this particular model is a little bit better done than usual, but I have to give credit here. This is a reasonably constructed knife. No complaints. So that is the good to me, is that this one is actually pretty well made. It has a nice tall, thin profile, which makes it pretty easy to carry, especially with this ambidextrous deep carry clip. It is very secure in the hand. The ergonomics are absolutely fine. The locks is actually done better here than usual in my experience, and then the boldness of naming the knife in another language is kind of neat. The great side to me, the opener on this guy is actually very nicely positioned. This is a weird little detail, but it is something I like very much. I feel like this knife, more than a lot, makes it very easy to fire out that blade using the thumb stud here. There are a lot of thumb studs that are not incredibly well positioned, but this one really is. And so I very much appreciated that. It makes it very easy to get a very satisfying deploy off of this knife. And so that's great, and I appreciated that very much. Next thing on the bad side here, Os-8 steel is what they're using here. It's not a stellar performer for everyday carry. It takes a very nice edge. It doesn't keep it forever. Given that they're probably not intending you to use this much, okay, whatever. But it is something you want to keep in mind, especially towards this kind of a price point. Next thing, it is a little bit scary and murdery. You take this guy out in the office, people are going to look at it like, okay, that's a murder weapon. And indeed, this one kind of is. Let's just be real here. Well, maybe self-defense, whatever. But nonetheless, yeah, so that's something you're going to want to keep in mind. This is not a people-friendly knife. Next thing, the heel of the blade on this guy is not well done. You can barely see it because it's DLC'd down here, but they basically just stopped the grind here, and this does not serve as a sharpening choil. They could have moved this a little bit forward and gotten a sharpening choil out of it, but they didn't for some reason. And so that's just not very good there. Next thing, the lock bar tension on this guy is really, really, really strong. And considering that they have this lock system to lock it shut or open, that is, in certain situations, I don't know why it is that strong. Maybe it's just overbent or something. Maybe they were using it to get that detent dialed in well. I don't know, but I'm not digging that particularly. Next thing, they have got a lot of freaking writing on this blade. For a hidden knife, this is absolutely blatant. On every side, I would kind of like to have seen them knock that down just a little tiny bit there. I mean, do you really have to put the patent number on there? Really, guys? And then finally, on the bad side, this feels like it is crying out for an Emerson Wave-style opener. The Wave-style opener is a little hook on the top that, when you pull the knife out of your pocket, will automatically deploy the blade effectively. It could be that they couldn't license it, and I'm not tactical, but this really does seem like something that they would want to include on this knife. This seems to be crying out for something like that, and it seems like kind of a weird omission if that's the direction that they're going here. So that's the bad to me. Is this really feels like, given what their goal is, they should be waving it. The blade writing is pretty obnoxious. The lock bar tension is super strong. The heel of the blade is just really badly done. It is a scary and murdery knife, and it is on Os-8 steel, so keep that one in mind. On the ugly side, unfortunately, the blade on this guy is, to me, pretty ugly for everyday carry. It is kind of precisely the wrong shape. They give you a whole bunch of belly with very, very little flat area. This is just a weird shape for everyday carry. And only the flat portion, which is going to be the most useful part for the cutting I do, is actually covered by the thumb disc, which is right in the middle of the slicing path here and will snag very readily on anything that you're cutting into. It is also super thick behind the edge, unfortunately. The steel on it is, like I said, unimpressive. I mean, overall, although this may be useful for putting holes in attackers, if that's the world you're in, it's really not good for putting holes in envelopes and boxes. This blade absolutely drove me kind of nuts. I don't like it really particularly at all. So to me, that's what's ugly, is if you look at this as an everyday carry knife, this blade is really not helping you out here much. So final conclusion, this is a specialized knife. It is really not meant for everyday carry, but for violence. Let's be real here. Whether you're preventing, stopping, or causing it, this knife is centered around that. Assuming that you're adequately trained to use a knife in self-defense, then I imagine this would be reasonable enough in that capacity. But like I said, talking to me about knives for self-defense is like talking to a blind guy about paint colors. Yeah, I might have opinions, but I wouldn't trust them. But from my side, the side I can probably be trusted on, an everyday carry perspective, this is just not a very good knife. It's not super attractive. It's very scary to people in the lunchroom, etc. The lock bar tension is very high. The blade is honestly kind of stupid for every task I threw at it. And honestly, it just doesn't work that well for the EDC role. Now, all that said, it's not poorly made particularly. It's nice in the hand. It's, for what they're claiming this is meant for, it seems pretty plausible. And the price tag of $85 is high, but you know what? It's actually well enough done and specialized enough that I don't think that's entirely out of line. And so ultimately, it's pretty conditional. If you are a samurai, you've got training, and you want to carry a knife solely for the purpose of self-defense, this might be a fine choice. There are other knives out there, it's worth saying, that are designed by competent self-defense people, which, at least in my experience, are better suited to being a pocket knife for day-to-day life. Kind of like your Spyderco Yo 2, your Jimbo 2, that is, or some of the ZT Emersons are pretty nice, and I gather they're also pretty tactically sound. Whatever. But the thing is, so if you're after that, then you might consider this guy along with other options. But if you want an extra Shabazz or somebody like me with a boring life and a different set of tools and approaches for keeping yourself safe, honestly, I wouldn't buy this knife whatsoever because, well, for anything but fighting, I think that this is just absolutely the wrong tool for the job. So anyways, I hope this is interesting to you, that my conclusions were not too hidden, and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful and, defense-free rest of your day. That is, you don't need to defend yourself. Have a good one, everybody. Bye now.